country needs transparency on this. Otherwise, the conspiracy theories go crazy.
Can you imagine if Donald Trump was accused of spying on six senators?
Yeah, I don't think the comparisons to Watergate are really that bombastic. I mean, this is quite exceptional.
The media is not talking about it. I encourage the audience to look through all of the mainstream publications.
Let's talk about the deep state, that shadowy blob of bureaucrats, spooks and swamp creatures who think they run America, no matter who you vote for. Well, have they finally proved it this week? We've learned that Biden's FBI secretly grabbed the phone records of 8 sitting US senators, so-called Operation Arctic Frost, into the supposed 2020 election meddling. 8 lawmakers spied on by their own government. Veteran Senator Chuck Grassley calls it worse than Watergate. And is he right? Is this oversight or overreach on steroids? Is the deep state finally flexing its muscles too far? Joining us to unpack all that is former FBI Special Agent Ren McEachern. Ren, thanks for joining us. This seems like a phenomenally large scandal that is being somewhat downplayed. We heard before the break about a massive scandal in Britain that's being underplayed. This strikes me as, you know, the government spying on lawmakers on what evidence?
Yeah, I don't think the comparisons to Watergate are really that bombastic. I mean, this is quite exceptional. And when it comes to, information and investigations against sitting senators, there is a very high threshold around DOJ to look at these politically charged subjects in this case. And then what was the probable cause, right, to the grand jury that thought grabbing the toll records of these sitting senators would make sense? Because I know what's going to happen next, right? Once they get those numbers, they're going to do link analysis and figure out who they're talking to and do the spider web and do the analysis and figure out who else can they look at. It's a political dragnet, and it shouldn't just be Republicans or Democrats that should be scared. Everybody should be scared, because if it can happen to them, it can happen to you. It's a huge misjustice and overreach, no question.
And it wasn't just senators as well. I mean, Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, has been very vocal today about the fact that, 3 weeks before he went back into the White House in January, Google magically popped up to tell him, oh yeah, by the way, we've been secretly feeding the feds your details. How far does this go? I mean, obviously the 8 lawmakers, the 8 senators, is a line that is crossed. There is precedents in place that politicians are not spied on. How far does this go? Is it beyond the senators and beyond Trump administration officials? This could be pretty devastating, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is just really the beginning, and thank God for the DOJ under Bondi and of course Patel with the FBI, that we wouldn't have known about this if it wasn't for them unearthing these and unclassifying these documents and finding them and saying, wait a minute, the public needs to know. We need to be transparent. I'm worried that this is just the beginning. And thankfully, we're going to find out, because there has to be, obviously, investigation within the Bureau, but then oversight under Grassley has to take a look at this. And I know they're going to dig deep on this. The community, the country needs transparency on this. Otherwise, the conspiracy theories go crazy, and I'm worried about where this might go. You
worked inside the FBI. You've been on the inside. Can you really imagine, agents? This is what they signed up for to spy on politicians?
Yeah, it would be odd. Of course, doing investigations into politicians is part of their remit for the Bureau and protecting the Constitution, but not this. This is way beyond. Like I said, this is a political dragnet. It's the weaponization of both the agents, the agency, and the law. And that's why it's devastating. And in the way they use it to look at toll records and looking at phones, that's a communication device. They look at IP. Do they look at devices that are attached to those phones, right? Where does this go? I think we're just going to, this is just the beginning. It's like the tip of an iceberg. But it's very curious to have 6 sitting senators being looked at like this. I can't think of a case like this in FBI history. That would be so sweeping in this way, and such one-sided from a political lens, if you will.
Donald Trump's obviously very vocal about his desire to see James Comey seek justice. Do you expect to see more of the agency's sort of headline names be brought into this and perhaps be, prosecuted?
Well, I think anytime they make an arrest and an indictment like James Comey, he will likely, I don't know for sure, he might provide information if he's looking to, plead out on a deal. And basically what happens there is then he'll give other people up. I think in the case of the intelligence community, it sounds like there's a lot of smoke. It looks like there's a lot of smoke. And I think, that has to be looked at to see where the fire exists. I think with James Comey, it's just the beginning. I think there's other members, former members of the intelligence community that have a lot to answer to and look very political into the idea of changing intelligence because they didn't like it, because they didn't fit the narrative, because they didn't think Trump was getting elected. This is what's disturbing. And the power of the intelligence community is beyond what most people can imagine. And it's just it scares me as an American citizen.
Well, I think it would scare any American citizen. Do you think, just final question, that, the old Trump derangement syndrome's in play here as well, because it's Kash Patel, Dan Bongino exposing this stuff, because it's the Trump administration exposing this stuff, the sort of media reaction to it has been far, far more muted than it would have been if the boot had been on the other foot. Can you imagine if Donald Trump was accused of spying on six senators? We wouldn't hear the end of this.
This would be the number one story for the next 10 years, right?
Yeah, right.
It's obviously super unfair the way this is reported. And it doesn't matter which side you're on. The documents are going to tell the case. Remember, follow the money, going back to Watergate.
Yeah.
Follow the documents. The documents will tell the story.
No wonder they were the hum of shredders was roaring around Washington in the run-up to January. Ren, thank you for joining us on Save the West. Come back and see us again soon. Right, hot-footed all the way from the White House, joining us in the studio, Daily Caller's White House correspondent Reagan Reese and Rebekah Zeljko from The Blaze. Both have just made it by the whistle, running down the street to join us. We're going to talk about what was going on at the White House after the break. Fascinating developments on a different front there. But let's talk about the story. Am I going crazy? Surely, imagine, as the point I made there to Ren, if this had been Trump on the other foot, this would just be dominating every network. Where's Jimmy? Where's Jimmy Kimmel?
Well, right now we're hearing all this whining about the DOJ being weaponized against James Comey and how President Trump is manipulating and controlling the DOJ. And meanwhile, we have a story like this. And I say, look to that. Look at the weaponization. Look at the politicization of the DOJ and how it was targeting President Trump's administration. And to say that this is only something that President Trump is doing and he has never been the victim of is unbelievable.
As well, right?
Yes.
Rebekah, listen, where does this go next? I mean, are you expecting to see more? I mean, is this just the tip of the iceberg? What else is Kash Patel and Bongino planning? How wide do you suspect this is going to go?
I mean, that's the question on everyone's mind right now, is how far does this really go? Because if you can violate the privacy of 8 sitting senators just because of their political affiliations, what it seems like. I mean, I would really love to know, I think the American people would love to know, which company has actually complied with this subpoena? Who turned over this information, this sensitive private information, and on what legal standing? And the fact that it can happen to senators means that it could happen to us or anybody else watching.
Journalists, I mean, imagine, if they're willing to spy on senators, there's no way in hell they're not listening to journalist calls and trying to find sources. Reagan, it does strike me that America's slipped down a path of, sort of prosecuting political opponents once the elections have passed. Obviously, that's the sort of thing we kind of associate with South America and banana republics and things. But Donald Trump kind of does have a point. He's always said they're kind of out to get me. And this is the smoking gun, right?
100%. And I think President Trump and his base are absolutely correct to be so angry about this. And I said this kind of jokingly today, but President Biden admitted that his DOJ was weaponized and politicized. And of course, he was talking about it when it came to his own son. But it was this very funny admission that President Biden made at the end of his term that kind of just proves this whole point that President Trump and his administration have been targeted. And I think, again, his base is so right to be frustrated. And of course, we're never going to hear about it. It's the same way we haven't heard about probably the Antifa roundtable at the White House, probably about Jay Jones. We haven't heard about any of these stories on the mainstream media because they don't care and they're against President Trump and his mission.
There is a spectacular hypocrisy here, right? I mean, presumably this is only going to enliven Donald Trump to put the pedal to the metal in terms of prosecuting. He's basically now got carte blanche to say, well, these guys, look what these guys did. Will we reach a point where everyone kind of steps back and just thinks, actually, let's talk about this, let's try and de-escalate this, let's talk about the actual scandal here, and the fact is the executive branch is clearly, on both sides, able to politicise the FBI like this? I
mean, the point of talking about it, I think, is the most important takeaway here, because as Reagan pointed out, The media is not talking about it. I encourage the audience to look through all of the mainstream publications, look through who's talking about this story at all, and look at how they're framing it. That's a really important point, and that's one that the president mentioned today at this Antifa roundtable. I mean, they really are the culprits.